Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wizard and the Priestess. I am your priestess, Nuala, at the front and center. I also have
Got a wizard in
Matt
the
over
house
there,
of the house.
Wizard in the house, Wizard in the house, the
Oh,
Wizard in the house,
shit.
Wizard in the house.
Lawless
Welcome to
start
the
as
house.
usual.
Okay, where are we at, Dad? Bird Dad today?
Yes, bird dad today. Well, something that most people would, I don't want to say suffer from, but let's say there's a decent deficiency in, and that's really how to listen to your gut feeling and how to.
This your joke?
Oh, I'm a joke. Um, how do you make an octopus laugh? Ted tickles.
Tickle it? Oh. Wow. That was
That was a worthy interruption. Definitely.
so
You're
what I
welcome.
was Matt, you did this again.
What?
I was gonna I was gonna say I was having a thought today about this conversation. Instead, you brought the topic in.
Yeah, it's just connected. We are.
Are we gonna start again, or are
No,
you
no,
willing to
as
keep?
you will. This is organic.
Anyway. Oh man. Okay, so you got to keep going then. Where were you?
Well, before I was rudely interrupted, I was just saying that most people suffer from a intuition deficiency and how to really go into the flow of that gut feeling and go into that, let's call it unknown aspect. And
Mhm.
as we discussed last week, a lot of that can be not necessarily shadow stuff, but it might have a shadow like sensation or feeling to it with it, and therefore it's going to scare us. So, is there an
Yeah,
Eastern
and
perspective on that, like a TMC model
TMC,
thing?
I'm not sure about the TMC model, but
TCF.
T like it your your interest your intuition would be correlated to your life's path. But I wanted to say something before you asked that question. And what I wanted to say was that we have no, I don't remember. Damn it. We have just traversed the Piscean season, which has ended at the equinox. And now we're moving into the fire, the Aries energy, the start of the year, the new year, astrological new year, and the equinox being on the 20th, which was the equal day and night once again. So we've hit that midpoint again. The midpoint, it's almost stillness before we start and move into the newness of the new year. Now, for us in the Southern Hemisphere, that newness actually goes into this deep dive. So we're harvesting we're reaping what we sowed. So we're harvesting all the things that we put into the earth in springtime, and now we're going to start moving into the descent that is the movement towards. Um, well, we are in autumn, but moving further and further into that.
Mm.
And the the thing that's really interesting is the Pisces is the end of the astrological year, and it's sort of we could see it. It's quite interesting in the way that it is that like it takes us into this watery depths of the shadow, this kind of digging in to pull out anything that's left, anything that or like everything that's sort of been dumped now. Now we're at the end, and it's almost like I kind of see it as like it's an ending of sorts, obviously, being that the fire starts us, ignites us again. For us in the Southern Hemisphere, it um I have had lots of conversations with different astrologers and how it's almost like we're at that transition period, but we like everyone's coming out, with the fire. They're like burning bright, and Aries for the Northern Hemisphere is lighting everything up. Whereas for us, it's like taking us in, it's slowing us down.
Mm.
So it's whilst we can kind of feel that fire, and depending on how that sits for you in your own natal chart, it's going to have a different, you're going to see different things. But this Piscean water that we've just moved through is literally what we are talking about last week. Those shadows, those deep depths, those things that are kind of like hidden underneath the surface that really want to come out and come through. And what when we come to fine tuning or really connecting to our intuition and being guided by that, it's sort of like we have to go into the depths of that water to allow the fire to burn it off, to clear it out, and to allow ourselves to come out and refreshed and anew. Now, for the energetics of that from the Southern Hemisphere is almost like we're doing that work, and then we're going to go in and work our way into hibernation and
Mhm.
work our way into landing and going slower and softening into that moment in time to find this place and space that sort of brings us back to stillness. And we're right now, we're reaping the rewards that we put into place last 6 months ago, or we're experiencing like some form of, there'll be a little bit of stillness that comes as we move towards the new moon. That will be the new moon in Aries. Oh no, will it be the new moon in Pisces coming up? That doesn't make sense to me. Um, must be. Anyway,
So it comes back to that cyclical rhythm and flow of the seasons.
yeah, 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 fully. It's Aries. The new moon is in Aries on the 29th of March, which essentially is yeah, the new year, which would
So,
mark the
so it's the new
astrological.
astrological year.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's this astrological year about, or the theme?
Well, it's all the same. It's very similar themes. It's a transitory year. It's a shedding year. So what we're actually traversing like now in terms of Pisces, um, harvest, it's almost like checking what's in your trunk,
Mm,
checking what you still got hidden and buried in the boot of the car, and doing that sort of spring clean on that stuff. But let's do it sort of hardcore,
mm,
because there is a like a catalyst occurring right now, and this year's energy, it's kind of it's gonna, I mean, I'm sure there's a little bit more to it, but I would stick to that transitory year, that that hermity 9 year. And it's almost like we're at a point where we can actually really um emphasize, exponentially utilize this energy so that we can now sort of go inwards in a sense. So we can now feel feel into that um feel into that more
mm,
for the hermit year, if that makes sense, or for the shedding of the skin. We need to kind of get underneath that a little bit deeper. And
mhm,
so I was um I was thinking about how, how do we really get to the bottom of that? Because there's a point where, we do all the shadow work. And I was actually talking in a group that I have, and we're talking about how there's lots of relational stuff coming up for a lot of us. And we were talking about just how, like, oh, and then I have to look back at me. And then I look back at me and I find the answers. And of course, that is always the way.
mhm,
But the thing that I was saying was that don't, if it feels heavy right now, that you can see that you need to look in your trunk. You can see you need to actually excavate a little bit, bring it to the surface, but you don't feel good about doing that.
mm.
It's probably not the right time for you. And then we started talking about, well, what is that? And that to me is your intuition. That is your innate internal clock that's guiding you to know the right time to do this. Because whilst I can sit here and say, astrologically, this means this, this, and this, we all have particular themes that come up for us in a particular season and time.
Mm.
So for like me, Morgana and I, we have the same natal framework in a sense. So together we move through the seasons in the same houses, which means that everything is lighting up at the same time. So for us, the like Piscean season is like connected or correlated to our Aquarius. And so we sort of like get into that. It's like kind of this yeah, double flow in a sense. But either way, it sort of we can move together and we can be activated by particular things similarly. Whereas for you, it's not the same. You're on a different natal path. So energetically, when I feel like go, go, go in January, because that's my Capricorn, that's my like go energy. That's my like get things in order, make money, blitz time. That's not the time for you necessarily. And whilst, like I've said before, we've got these frameworks, it's also, from my perspective, really important to remember that these are frameworks to move from and have a bit more understanding and guidance from. But then we have to also honor that intuition and that inner nudge that helps us to really like um be on our soul's journey. And it is the thing that I believe is guiding our soul journey. And so what I wanted to ask you, Matt, before we can touch on the TCM in a second, but is there something that you have deliberately done that doesn't really make sense, but it came from something inside of you that just felt like you needed to do, say, act a certain way because it was not logic sense, but yeah, it was the right thing to do for you.
Well, I think there's a few things. I think one is probably something I haven't said. And growing up, I knew it was polite. I was told it was very polite to ask people how they were, and I never did. Not to be rebellious, but I didn't ask because I already knew. But then there was a part of me saying, just say it, fit in. But then it would never come out. So that's kind of the
Hmm.
opposite of that. But then another thing that makes, I don't know if this is really an answer to the question, but the earliest, what came up in my mind was the earliest I can remember kind of knowing something, but then not doing it or saying it at the same time is the day mum died, when I was out of the car and I remember I had a lot of snot coming from my nose. And I just remember thinking, oh, someone will clean this up. It'll be fine. Someone will do it for me. Someone did, being 3.5. And then remember asking where mummy was. And then the lady holding me in her arms just said, oh, mummy's sleeping. But I had full conscious awareness of what was going on. And it was almost like an out of body thing where I knew exactly what was going on. But then I would put myself into that 3.5-year-old mind and it'd be just completely changed. It was really weird. But there's other times where I remember the first time I went camping and seeing this big glowing thing. I thought, that's going to be hot. That's going to hurt if you touch that. Next minute, in tears. So there's lots of little moments like that. What about you?
Yeah, wow, it's pretty profound in those moments where I would say that, for example, the day that mum died, it would have been that part of me would expect that that would have been something that was buried deep down inside of you, you know, the emotion of that, the experience of that, they would have, that whole thing of like, well, this is actually an active event that you're a part of. But it's quite interesting to me that I believe that you must have already had all of these life skills and you know that too. But it's like, it's just affirming for me that because you've been able to then now be like, yeah, I understood all this and
Mm.
I actually had the knowledge in this moment of what it was like to see this from an adult perspective. And then I understood that I had to be a child and I
Mm.
had to kind of, the child in me, the child in you in that moment needed just to accept that mum was asleep
Mm.
and or be told like and be like okay yep mum's asleep and then I bet you probably asked so when's mum she gonna get out of bed or
Mm.
like something along those lines. um and thank you for sharing because it's like it is quite powerful to hear. um but it is like also stuff that I think needs to be shared in such a simple way because life is life and death is death and
Mm.
it's going to continue on that continuum for forever.
Mm.
Um, the it's interesting for me because when the reason I even thought of this was because I was sharing this with someone today about how like I remember once I was with some friends and I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I was doing hopscotch, like I was hopping on my leg, and I was hopping and hopping, and then I saw this like VB sticker, and I looked at it, and in my head I thought there's going to be glass underneath that, and it will hurt, or it'll be like it, or there's glass underneath that, and you shouldn't jump on it. And in the moment that I had that moment, and it said you shouldn't jump on it, I could have changed course, but I didn't. I jumped on it,
Next minute, boom.
cut my tendons, almost sliced my toe off, was in a cast for 6 weeks, literally was on about to just go on school holidays. I actually, like, I don't know what was wrong, but I was so itchy from all the sand. I like had Tazos down there. Like, I had to cut it off early, but the whole thing, the reason I had the cast on was to help the nerves grow back so that my toes wouldn't get like stuck. I think they're all right. Would show you. Um, but yeah, it was a very clear moment in my mind where it was very, do not jump on that.
Mm.
And there was a nudge that said to me, do it. Or like, you know what? It didn't even say do it. It was just did.
Mm.
And I think that part of me feels like that was part of a soul lesson, like a learning lesson that I needed.
Mm.
And whether that was it's quite interesting because these family friends, like the mother of my friend, she was like, oh, she couldn't believe something like this had happened, and she was so like devastated by the fact that I had hurt myself under her watch and ended up in hospital and all the things. Like as you can imagine as a mother, like it is pretty, you're looking after someone else's kid and they get hurt. Like it's pretty gut-wrenching. But I don't remember, there was no like concern for me. It was just
Mm.
that it happened. And like I remember being like, oh yeah, there's lots of blood. Okay. Like it was sort of anyway. I think the lesson was bigger than the cut and bigger than my friend's mum, but it really yeah, I'd have to sit with that a little bit more, but I do truly believe that that was a nudge.
Well, I think
There was
that's
something in that.
yeah. The every lesson is a you can think of it as a soul lesson. The soul doesn't really,
Mm.
I don't want to say care, but the soul, it's not about whether it's good or bad or it's painful or it's not. That's not a soul concern, if you will. It's
Yeah.
about the experience. The soul wants the experience of it.
Mm.
It's our ego self or our persona that determines whether it's a good or bad, right or wrong, should or shouldn't type deal. But our soul will guide us to things that make very little logical sense at the time. Like for example, some people might be in a certain job making X amount of money, but then they get called to work with animals or something. But that's just their heart kind of calling them to do that. And some people will pack up everything and go and do it, and they will feel very fulfilled with their heart, but their bank account might suffer. But another person might stay and keep the bank account topped up and still have that yearning to work with the animals in that example. So these are all really soul lessons, and you'll know you could recognize a soul calling because it just calls you. It's an innate something that just kind of piques your interest, and then you might sort of see things like on an ad or a billboard or you just keep seeing little signs that will remind you of that thing. And we've talked about synchronicities a lot, and I think that's just one of the ways you could say our higher self or our soul just gives us little breadcrumbs, and just yep, don't forget about that. Just keep it in your consciousness and see where it takes you. And it's kind of trying to guide you. It's never going to tell you what to do. But I think we
Mm.
often, if we have a thought that feels good, that creates the desire, that desire is the negative, and then its positive gets drawn to it. But then the positive that gets drawn to it is the soul. Like that's when you have the desire, it's the equivalent of a question. So you're asking for some kind of not necessarily guidance, but some kind of, yeah, this is what I want, or I want to learn more about this, or whatever that desire is. And then you will get little trinkets, whether you recognize them or not, they will be there. Probably wouldn't recommend it standing on a VB sticker, but hey, we've got to do what we've got to do. I don't judge.
Good. I mean, mate, you just touched a fire, but righto.
It's a wizard thing.
Um,
You wouldn't understand.
I thought when you said there was this ball of flame, and you're like, cool. I thought,
Mm.
oh my, oh wow, like you're really connected to your psychic powers at such a young age. And then it touched and it was burning. I was like, oh,
Yeah,
right.
I can
Um,
I can retell that story upon hindsight now.
um, yeah, I think it's quite interesting to follow your gut. And I mean, I don't know if it's what it is and but I do truly believe now that every experience I've had is through my life has led me to this moment, obviously. But it is also this there is something innate in that I have taken the action that I've taken. There has been so often times where I've decided I need to do a certain thing and I've been told you shouldn't do a thing. And I'm like, I need to do it. I'm going to do it. And like, it's quite interesting that, I mean, when I think about some of the things, I'm like, oh, of course. But it's like, I remember yeah, when I was moving to Hampus in Sweden, and I was like, friends of mine are like, don't waste your life doing that. Like, this kid is a kid. He's not he's not the person.
How old was he
And
at the
I was
time?
like, no, 22. I
Oh,
was 23.
oh.
So like we were young people. And I remember I was like, yeah, I thought I'm like, no, I've got to go. And then when I got there, I was like, oh my God, what have I done? I've got to start again. Like I just, I was a Chinese medicine practitioner. I was like practicing. I was kind of really excited to be practicing, and I had a great job that was like really fulfilling and all these things. And then I was like, no, I'm going to go now, and I'm going to go and be with this guy who is, trying to make it in his sport. And it was
Mhm.
a bit like we weren't 100% what way he was going to go and all the things. And anyway, whatever. So it was. And then, now we're doing all the things we're doing. And it's almost
Mhm.
like it really feels there's so many pieces along the way. But don't know how it was, but I have fine-tuned the nudges for myself. I
That's a
have
good way to put it. Yeah.
fine-tuned the um I have fine-tuned this aspect of my knowing and I followed it enough and it has landed me on my feet enough that I keep doing it.
Mm.
And it's pretty magical. Even the other day when we were moving up here and we were I handed over some of the usual things that I would organize because I like to do that, but I'm trusting in Hampus more and more to, to be the guidance. And he essentially ordered a truck, which was too small for our move, and we ended up having to get another truck. And moral of the story, my brother said to Luana, my daughter, um, oh, like if I had have organized it, I would have got the bigger truck. And Luana said, Uncle Sean, don't worry. It's just money. We can just get more. And my brother is like, now I don't know what you're teaching Luana in terms of how money comes about, but all I know is my brother won't listen to this, but all I know is
Mm.
that budgeting and a good steady job or steady income is the only way to really like be able to make sure money comes in, like a moderate plan, budgeting. And I'm like, oh, right. Like we literally moved here without a plan because we both knew that was what we needed to do.
Mm.
And we don't have a plan. And people are interested, as you know, like people want to know what we're doing and what's next and how you're going and like, is Hampus okay? Still upright? Not dead
Mhm.
yet, kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, miraculously, he's doing fantastically.
Mm.
And yeah, see, bird confirmation over there. But it is just, all these pieces is just constantly being nudged. And then I see that in, this idea of money for Luana. She does see it as energy. And
Mm.
I'm like, it was a real proud moment for me. Like, the world is telling her that that is not the way forward. And she's just like, well, we'll just get more.
Mm.
Like, how hard could it be? And it's just like, yeah, it is. I mean, mind you, my family think I live in a fairy tale land because, like, obviously now we have had the support of my mum, right? Without my mum, we wouldn't have that. But I don't doubt that that's there for a reason.
Mm.
And I think anyone in my position would hope that they had something to support them to lean into, to land on. Um, hence the importance of family in these sorts of experiences and times. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's I was going to say something before when you were talking and I thought I wanted to ask you more about this in sense that the shadow piece of so the nudge that comes or the intuition that is there that is prompting us forth in one way or another, whatever that might be or whatever direction that might be, illogical as it is. Or logical, doesn't have to be illogical. But the unless we have the shadow, do you believe that we can get that with the shadow unkept? Or do you believe that you must understand what programs you're running that aren't serving your highest good from a human level in order to receive the soul level information?
I think once you acknowledge it and accept it, it becomes a lot clearer. Whereas if you're continuously suppressing your shadow, then the message comes through, but then your capacity to decipher the message is suppressed to the degree you're suppressing the shadow. Because you need to receive it with all of your being. But if you're suppressing that part of yourself, you can't receive it with all of your being. So the
Mm,
shadow might be a huge part of yourself or a tiny bit that's just more of a niggle than a massive fear. But either way, the more that's put on the back shelf, that's the part of the message that you're still not really getting. And
Downloading, yeah.
yeah, and then the next download you get might be about the thing on the shelf and it just scares the shit out of you. So you're going to run the other way, or you're going to ignore that or try and medicate that. And all it's
Can
really,
you give all it's really
sorry,
sorry, all it's really doing is
or all it's really,
trying to tell you.
it's trying to tell you to look at your shadow. And it's not that, it's trying to tell you that it's not that scary. It just needs to
Mm.
be acknowledged like an upset child. And
Can you give me an example of that? Like what you just said metaphorically. Give me an example.
well, it might be a part of you that needs, it's often a part of you that needs healing, but it's a part of you that you might you might not feel heard, right? So one of your triggers in this world might be when someone tells you to shut up or they dismiss what you've said. That's going to create a reaction in you where you what you really need to communicate is, okay, I've got it, you know, maybe I was shut down as a kid, but I need to feel heard, to be equal in this exchange right now. But then if I don't know that consciously, all I know is that you're going to tell me to shut up and I'm just going to react back. So that's an example of a shadow. But because I don't know that, all I know is that my fuse is tiny, that one word is just going to, set the furnace off. Then I don't know what it is. Therefore, the unknown to most people is full of fear because they don't know what it is. But you might receive
Because what
intuitive,
could be, yeah.
we might receive an intuitive download and it'll probably keep sending us people. Like the universe will keep sending us people that trigger that in us. Where the lesson for that
Mm,
is to, okay, well, why is that a thing for you?
mm,
Whereas someone else just might continuously just build up anger and start resenting people and start resenting their life and their circumstances, and that creates that internal friction that we were talking about, mental health episode. I can't remember what number that was, but that's really the start and the seed of disease, or one of them
mm.
anyway. Does that example make sense to you?
Yeah, for sure. And what I wanted to say was that like the universe is giving them prompts or giving us prompts, me included. And I'm not seeing them clearly because of the shadowing the input or the download. And it's there was something I wanted to just say on that with when it comes to like moving this in towards what you were asking earlier about the TCM perspective. And it depends how you look at it. But from a Taoist perspective, which there is a lot of even Confucian, it's the idea in these kind of ancient understandings um, is that there is a Tao, there is a way, there is a particular way in which we're meant to do life here. And when we're following how our Tao or our Tao,
Mm,
it it works for us. Everything comes to us, but nothing can come to us in the way that it's meant to until we have essentially um, excavated or worked through or transformed those shadow pieces into the persona and into that capital S elf that we talked about last
mm,
week. Because it's when we actually can move from that soul self space energetically, we are vibrating at a more balanced frequency. And when we balanced frequency, then the downloads just do come through so much easier. We're no longer being sent messages by the by the mother-in-law that keeps telling you how crappy you are at a parent as parent
Mm,
or whatever it might be. That's not my reality, but there's someone or something that just like keeps going and it never ends, or it's a crappy relationship that keeps shining lights in dark places.
mm,
And I definitely feel like in recent times that even from my perspective, just following the nudges more has actually lightened the load of the shadow
mm,
because it's almost like it's working in the opposite direction. So the shadow has existed, and I have looked at it from one direction or one perspective, but never fully gotten underneath it and brought it up and like kind of opened the blinds and let the light on it fully. I've kind of looked at it from one side and gone, okay, yeah, I see you there. Looked at it from another side and been like, oh, okay, there's something there. And then now I'm being nudged in, do this, like reach into that. Like, I've written a few like affirmations for myself, and that has been, do not invest your time in people, places, and experiences that don't light you up. And obviously, this is easier said than done. However, small, strong forward steps always lead us back to ourselves. And I definitely feel that if we as a collective can do our part in gently progressing along this path, it's every person can just do their small steps. Miracles are just out there open and bound to happen. And I think we get a bit sidetracked. I mean, some days when we're having off days and we choose not to do the things that we've set in stone, or we choose not to do the things that are that light us up, or we choose to deliberately go down a kind of rage spiral, victim spiral. We choose away from that golden path, and we choose away from what our intuition is really guiding in us. It might be guiding us to rest. That might be guidance, but I think every time we action something lazy, generally that is not coming from a higher golden path purpose
but no, that'll be coming
direction.
from a conditioned response, like a
Mm,
programmed response. But I have a question to put to you, Miss Priestess.
mm.
What would someone do if that energy isn't theirs? So they've picked that up from somewhere, friend, family member, partner, whoever. How would you get them to navigate that?
And you mean that they have picked up some sort of lazy energy or some sort of nudge in a direction that isn't actually intuitively their own?
Let's say it's some kind of anxiousness or some depressive feeling, some kind of negative, as we'd put.
Yeah, okay. So someone around them is experiencing these feelings and that is being projected onto them. I guess first of all, you really want to you need to maintain your self-practice. So you need to maintain whether that is breathing, whether that is exercise, whether that is mo gentle somatic movement, whether that is connecting an imaginatory journey into the mind through the body, um, even if that's a couple of minutes. So let's say someone has been low and down in the dumps for some time and that projection is becoming too heavy to hold, then that is what I'm talking to now, ensuring that you maintain your own self practice. You maintain someone outside of that relationship that you can lean to, talk to, and divulge or express. And that person that you want to lean to, you want to make sure is a active listener and has the skills of active listening. They're not just having the skills of gossip and enabling all the victimhood that you might be sharing. Someone that can actively listen is someone that can hear what you're saying, hold you in that, and say, I hear you, so you feel heard. I can understand how this makes you feel, so you feel felt. And then allowing you to say, it's gently bringing you back to yourself, which would be something along the lines of, how does that make you feel? What step can you take? Bringing it back to, do you take responsibility for yourself? But ensuring that you're speaking to an active listener and not someone who is then going to turn back and say, oh, that must be so hard. That person is such a terrible person. And whilst they're having a hard time, you're having a hard time. It's almost, it keeps you in a place of victim, and it stops you from actually um, coming back to an unclouded judgment or an unclouded intuition that's going to keep downloading towards you. So that is if someone is um, in a low place for a long period of time. I mean, we always need active listeners in our lives, but just being conscious of who we reach to and who we lean on in times of hardness for a long period of time, especially if we're having big projections put onto us. On a simple term, did you want to touch on that if someone's been around you for a long time feeling low, and is there anything else you would add?
Um, it's probably hard in the moment to recognize it, but just realizing that it's not yours, firstly. And as you were
Mm.
saying, getting to that point where you're talking to someone where you feel heard or they feel heard slash understood. And then there's a clear, here's what the trigger is or was, here is how I feel about it, and here is what I need right now. Very few people have the capacity in those states of being to display that and practice that. So, a good resource for that is the book Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg, where he goes down and really, I guess, he breaks it down into bite-sized pieces for you to follow along that sort of process. And it's not violent communication, verbally pointing the finger, you're this, you're that, you do this, you don't do that. It's a, when I hear that, I feel dot, dot, dot. So there's two different energies with words there, but recognizing that it's not yours. And sometimes we need to communicate that from a place of almost self-preservation. And so I love helping you. I need this for myself, this time or this to do this activity, whatever that is. And that is what you were
Mm.
alluding to before, which is kind of like a part of a spiritual practice. Something that's yours, something that is for you, so you don't become a vacuum for all the other stuff. And then the more you can fill your own cup up, then you have more of a capacity to help the other. And ideally, if you're in a relationship, they're doing the same. So if you need that, then they can hold the space for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so many, yeah, so many directions. I think in a moment where you're around someone who is having a big time and they are projecting whatever they might be onto you, one of my go-to practices is to wrap myself up in a ball of light. And in doing that, I'm protecting myself from being impacted by that projection. And in doing that, I find one of the best places to practice that is with family. And I find that if there's something going on or I've shared something and it is absolutely, devalued, invalidated, uh, essentially not, it's not received in the way that I was expressing it, or at least
Classic
I don't
Tuesday.
feel heard. And so, in that moment, I find that if I can catch myself fast enough and wrap myself in a ball of light, I can just find I find in that moment practice, I start breathing because usually, you're moving towards a triggered state in that situation. And then I see the light over my body and I start to breathe. And that I think is enough to then switch me out of that fight or flight back into that parasympathetic, gentle, okay, I hear that you don't understand. And okay, I'm going to accept the end of this conversation or whatever that might be. And then moving on to only the things that light me up again. So yeah, I think I've practiced poking the bear a lot in my in my life. And
How did that
especially
go?
as a clinician, mm, I mean, as I was about to share as a clinician, I think poking the bear was hard for a lot of people to receive, and I get it. I have also felt from most of my clients, at least clients that have stuck it out with me, they're like, wow, in you, it's almost like you lifted a layer that I wasn't willing to lift before, and I wasn't prepared to. And then you actually just lifted it off, like mm, an analogy would be like I was snug in my bed complaining, and then you just pulled the blanket off me, and I was just laying there going like, hang on, I don't want to get up yet. It's cold. So yeah, that's probably my expression poking the bear for some of my clients, and their response has been like, "Oh, okay, I've just got to get up now. I've got to get going then. I can't I'm not going to lay here cold. I have to do the thing. I have to action the thing." And then there's other people that just go and get a different blanket and wrap themselves back up, get back into bed and say, "Yeah, get out of here." Like I always say to my child when she wakes up at 5 a.m. Um, and I don't want to get up yet. But yes. So I guess there's a lot of things that I want to uncover, and I really look forward to sharing more about the journey that we've been on, at least I've been on in 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 recent months, and the repercussions of what I feel is happening in the astro world, and the energetics of this transformational year of the nine, of the snake, and all these things come together, these frameworks that come together that I really feel energetically are having a real deep death death transformation experience for me personally, but I also see it in the world around us. If I went and did yoga for the first time and it was beautiful and it was so grounding, and I really need that practice in my life. It's just difficult for me I do really like going to class because I like the energy that is provided by a class experience. And because it is kind of like going to church, there is something spiritual about practicing together rather than alone. And I know that a lot of this, that idea that you should practice alone, you should be able to go deep into your darkest soul and come out the other side. Even the on over the weekend, I went to Morgana's um, workshop, the shades of the feminine or dark shades of the feminine. And I think there's something special about doing that in a group setting. So you then have to own your own shit. You have
Mm.
to own that because you're going to share that with other people, and you just open and you're raw and you're vulnerable, but you're vulnerable with other people. So I think when you do it at home, you can go one of two ways. You can get stronger and angrier, or you can go dark into a barrel of sorrow and victimhood. So it's sort of when you're with other people, you're kind of like, oh, I'm also held here. So my victimhood isn't really acceptable,
Mm.
and my anger isn't, or resentment and bitterness isn't either.
Yeah. So
So
what? Sorry, finish your thought.
mm, that's all right. You go.
I was just going to say what came up for me when you were talking about the being grounded and just sort of owning it is that you can't change what you don't own. So if you are feeling in that space where everything's spiraling, or you feel like static on a TV, it's moving so fast you can't really measure it. Just own it, acknowledge it. Once you've owned it and acknowledged it, say, I feel afraid, I feel angry, I feel sad, I feel dot dot dot. That's you owning it. And then once you own it, then you can change it. But it's just
Mm,
bringing it to the light. And that's
mm.
how we can get all the little monsters that we have in the shadow.
Yeah. And I think bringing it back to this idea of intuition and how the nudges come more clearly when we are more clear. So the importance that we are bringing the dark to light, just to bring it to light and to accept that the darkness is also, so for example, we were speaking of yesterday, just the idea, the darkness of the feminine, for example, she is ragey, but she's powerful. She is emotional, but she can feel, she's sensitive. She is the goddess on the edge of the cliff with the wind in her hair and like the power to kind of, you know, split the ocean in two, but she's also the wretched witch that can like cast a spell on and create a tornado. It's sort of like the dark is in both of those, but it's in the integration of the kind of um negative energetics of that and bringing forth the light and the power. And I think that the intuition and intuition is so closely linked to like the psyche and the psychic and the guidance that from my perspective is coming from that um the capital SELF, like all capital self, right? That like energy is there and available for us to play with and dance with if we want it to be there. um but then obviously also we get twisted and messed about and energetically broken down in times because we can't quite get there. We have to break it through. We have to move through. We have to remember what is us, what is being projected onto us. Um, and then just simply coming back to simple things like breathing and putting our feet on the earth and watching the rain hit the window pane and um, yeah, full surrender in this moment as well. So when we're not feeling 100% or when someone around us isn't feeling 100% and that's impacting us, that we can actually still receive some form of joy in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, we are the expression of that capital S, capital E, capital L, capital F. And I think when we just go through little human times, we accidentally press the caps lock key and then it goes into lowercase. That was a good analogy. I'm proud of that.
Proud of you. Yeah, and something that's just come to mind is that, when we get to sit here in this moment and be like, I'm just a human vessel, like I have somehow conjured up this experience around me, and the nudges that are coming, they're actually coming for me, and they want to be a part of me. They like, I'm wanting them to be a part of me. And if I can see that I'm bringing these things in, then I can also change and transmute them. And I think right now you're in such a potent moment in time that energetically, whether you do it right now at the beginning of this new astrological year, or if you start to step towards it throughout this whole year, you're going to find that the nudges to actually transform and transmute anything that's been holding you back and pulling you down is going to come. You don't have to search for it. I said recently in something one of these groups I'm a part of that you don't like if you don't feel the nudge to get going into the transformative space, don't worry. Don't let it. If you feel like you need to rest whilst maintaining smaller steps towards your goals, that's okay. But just keep doing those smaller steps, whatever those smaller steps are, maintaining your meditation practice, getting up in the morning at the same time, reading that book, 10 pages a night, simple, simple things, simple steps, breathing in moments of being triggered. if you can catch it, do your best, keep those simple, small steps happening in that direction. And the energy will come to you when it is time to actually go in. And I think that for me is one of the biggest nudges. I will get a full steam train of energy. Go do that right now. And the more often I follow that, the more empowered I feel. And I think that's something that, you know, how to heighten, how to connect to our intuition a little bit more. So if you have a question that you need to answer, or a question that keeps bothering you, a thought that keeps like kind of activating an emotion inside of you that doesn't feel like it should be there, write the question down on a piece of paper and then free write. So you just automatic write until something comes through. And I do this sometimes and it can be like, you know, you know, there's a clock on the wall, there's curtains over there, they're red, there's rain outside, there's trees. Then all of a sudden I'm writing about the forest and how that forest is a like a representation of what's going on inside of me and whatever, whatever. And all of a sudden I'm writing this narrative story and like really divulging this full answer, full bodied answer onto the page. And I think that is one way that we can really hone in on our intuition. Is there a way that you think of, Matt, that comes to mind
Well,
that's helped
often,
you?
yeah, often times I'm not much of a writer, but I tell people to
Mm,
write. That's just not my personal, that's not what I'm called to do. I think when we get an intuitive download, very rarely is it logical or rational to our, I guess, concept of what reality is. But that's because the psyche will speak to us in symbols and metaphors. So for me, it helps me, I find it helpful to then think in metaphors rather than writing things down. And when I can look at it metaphorically, I can see it's like looking at a problem or a situation, whatever it is. Initially, when I'm stressed about it, it's like me looking through a straw. But when I think of it metaphorically or symbolically, I feel like it opens up a greater, a much
mhm.
greater viewpoint, vantage point. So I can see it from a higher perspective, and then I can see the lesson. Then I can see the message or whatever that is. That's how I've um guess used that little.
Practice.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's another really cool thing about that whole vantage point and giving yourself space for that. Recently, on from the guidance of Morgana, actually, she suggested that I start writing down my dreams. And I don't often get a lot of the dream, but I remember something and I'll write that down. And it is quite interesting to then usually break that down with her or break that down with someone who um, kind of gives you that like vantage point of what this might be telling you, what your subconscious or unconscious is currently, your unconscious is lifting to the subconscious
Mm-hmm.
through the dream state. And then you then have a choice to bring it into the consciousness or not. And it's a powerful practice. And I think that as as we move towards, I was going to say this before when I was at this yoga class the other day, there was a lot of, there's people feeling tumultuous right now.
Mm.
I don't really feel that way. I am craving this change, this transition, this I don't know what is going on point. I feel good in that transformation. I feel good in knowing that transformation is coming and happening. Now, I don't know too many people that are personally really, really negatively impacted by the world right now. I know that the news is telling people that there's some real negative impacts going on, but I don't know anyone that is truly personally impacted. So I'm sorry if that is you. I don't know you. But my point is that we are taking that on as if it is our own.
Mm.
We are being filtered through the lens of whatever negativity, whatever kind of evil is at play, and we're taking that on, or we can. And I choose not to. And it's been quite interesting because I have heard that a few times, oh, the things, it's really, the chaos that's out there happening in the world. And I just think to myself, I'm like, the only chaos that's happening is inside of you.
Mm.
And the more chaos that's happening inside of you, the more chaos you see in the world.
Well, our reality is a reflection of our inner consciousness, really. So can't not.
Mm. So, on that note, keep transforming, keep transmuting, listen in and flow with your tide. Let the ocean crash into you and show you the way forward.
Boom.
Nice to hear from you. If you leave us a review or a comment, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, please feel free to leave us a lovely review, 5-star rating, and we will be your best friends.
Forever and ever.
Aho.
Peace.